Look at your kitchen for a second. The cereal box on your counter, the milk in your fridge, the bread in your pantry, the foods you've trusted for years, maybe decades, to feed your kids, stretch your grocery budget, and keep your family healthy. Now imagine being told that some of those choices, they're no longer what the government says you should be eating. That's not a hypothetical. That's happening right now. In 2026, the official U.S. food pyramid, the guide that influences school lunches, hospital meals, SNAP benefits, military rations, and even food prices, has changed. Quietly, no national alert, no emergency press conference. But make no mistake, this change reaches directly into your life, your family, and your wallet. If you're a parent trying to feed kids on a tight budget, this affects you. If you're a senior watching every grocery dollar, this affects you. If you rely on food assistance programs, this affects you. And if you've ever stood in a grocery aisle wondering why food costs more but feels less filling, this video is about you. Because here's the truth most Americans don't realize. When the food pyramid changes, the ripple effect hits everything. What foods get subsidized? What foods get taxed? What foods schools are allowed to serve? What foods stores promote? And eventually, what foods become cheaper or more expensive? This isn't just about nutrition. It's about power, money, and long-term health costs. It's about what future generations will grow up eating and what they may never afford again. And here's the suspenseful part. Some of the biggest changes sound healthy, but could quietly raise grocery bills, limit choices, and push families into tougher decisions. Others could actually help you if you understand them early. So stay with me. Because once you see what moved up, what dropped down, and what almost disappeared altogether, you'll never look at your grocery cart the same way again. What changed and why it matters to you. For decades, Americans were taught a simple message: grains at the bottom, fruits and vegetables above, proteins and dairy somewhere in the middle, fats and sugars at the top. It was drilled into classrooms, textbooks, and public health campaigns. But in 2026, that familiar structure was officially reshaped, and the reasons go far beyond health science. The new food pyramid places whole plant foods, fiber-dense vegetables, and protein diversity at the foundation, not refined grains. That means white bread, pasta, and heavily processed cereals are no longer considered everyday staples. Instead, they're now closer to occasional foods. Why does that matter to your wallet? Because refined grains have historically been cheap, heavily subsidized, and easy to mass produce. When they lose priority, the financial incentives behind them weaken. That can mean higher prices, fewer options, and less shelf space over time. Meanwhile, foods like legumes, nuts, fish, and fresh produce are pushed higher. But here's the catch. Those foods often cost more, spoil faster, and require more prep time. For families working long hours or living in food deserts, that shift isn't simple, it's stressful. The government says this change is about reducing chronic disease, lowering healthcare costs, and improving long-term outcomes. But what they don't say out loud is that the transition period could be rocky, especially for low and middle-income Americans. Another big change? Ultra-processed foods are now explicitly flagged as something to limit. That includes many frozen meals, packaged snacks, and budget convenience foods families rely on when time and money are tight. So, when you hear food pyramid update, don't think abstract policy. Think school lunch menus changing. Think SNAP-approved food lists adjusting. Think grocery stores slowly reorganizing aisles. And think about how your weekly bill might look 6 months from now if you're not prepared. How this affects your grocery bill immediately. Let's talk dollars and cents, because that's where this hits hardest. When the food pyramid changes, suppliers follow the money. Food manufacturers reformulate products to match guidelines. Retailers prioritize shelf space for approved foods. And over time, prices shift, sometimes quietly, sometimes suddenly. With the 2026 update, demand is expected to rise for foods like fresh vegetables, beans, lentils, eggs, fish, and minimally processed proteins. When demand rises faster than supply, prices follow. That means foods already considered healthy could become even more expensive. At the same time, products falling out of favor, like refined grain snacks and sugary breakfast foods, may see fewer discounts, fewer coupons, and eventually fewer options. For families already stretching every paycheck, this can feel like punishment for trying to eat right. But there's another layer most people miss. Government food programs often align purchasing rules with dietary guidelines. When priorities shift, what you're allowed or encouraged to buy can shift too. That affects millions of Americans directly. If you're thinking, this sounds like another change that makes life harder, you're not wrong to feel that way. But there's also opportunity. If you understand how to adapt early, families that learn which foods are rising in priority can shop smarter, switch proteins strategically, and avoid panic buying when prices spike. The key is knowing what's coming before it shows up on your receipt. And the worst thing you can do? Ignore it and hope prices stay the same. History shows they don't. What this means for kids and school meals. Now let's talk about something personal. Your kids. School lunches across America are built around federal nutrition guidelines. When the food pyramid changes, cafeterias follow, sometimes slowly, sometimes overnight. And the 2026 update is one of the biggest shifts schools have faced in years. Expect to see fewer refined grains and more plant-based proteins, more beans, more vegetables, less pizza crust, fewer breaded items, and more whole food meals. That sounds good on paper, but here's the real-world question. Will kids actually eat it? Many districts are already struggling with food waste. When meals don't match kids' preferences, trays end up in the trash, and parents end up packing lunches or buying extra snacks after school. That's more money out of your pocket. For lower-income families, school meals aren't just convenience. They're a critical source of daily nutrition. If changes reduce participation because kids don't like the food, that creates a hidden problem no guideline can fix. The hope is that over time, exposure builds healthier habits. But the transition period matters, and families need to be ready. Parents who understand these changes early can adjust breakfast and dinners to balance what kids may miss during the school day. That awareness alone can save money and stress. The SNAP and food assistance connection. Here's where things get serious. The food pyramid doesn't just guide advice, it influences policy. And policy shapes food assistance programs like SNAP and WIC. While benefits aren't disappearing, priorities are shifting. Foods aligned with new guidelines may be promoted, incentivized, or featured more heavily. Others may quietly lose emphasis. That can change buying habits overnight. For families using SNAP, that means learning which foods give you the most nutrition per dollar under the new framework. Beans, lentils, frozen vegetables, eggs. These are likely to become even more important. The danger? Misinformation. Social media rumors can cause panic. People hear changes and assume cuts or bans. That's not what's happening. But confusion can still hurt families. Knowledge is power here. The more you understand the intent behind the changes, the better you can protect your food security. Why? This change is happening now. So why 2026? Why now? Healthcare costs are exploding. Chronic disease is rising. And the government is staring down decades of preventable medical spending tied directly to diet. This update is a long-term bet. Spend less on treatment later by encouraging better eating now. Whether it works depends on execution. But make no mistake, this isn't just science. It's economics, it's sustainability, it's politics. And once guidelines change, they rarely go backward. That's why paying attention now matters. The foods that moved up and down. Some foods gained power, others lost it. Whole vegetables, legumes, and diverse proteins moved up. Ultra-processed foods slid down. Sugary drinks stayed at the very top. The limit as much as possible zone. That ranking influences advertising, funding, and availability over time. Understanding this helps you shop smarter instead of reacting emotionally when prices shift. How to adapt without spending more. Here's the hopeful part. Adapting doesn't have to mean spending more. Frozen vegetables count. Dried beans are cheap. Eggs are versatile. You don't need luxury health foods to follow the new pyramid. The families that thrive are the ones who plan, not panic. What happens if you ignore this? Ignoring these changes won't stop them. Prices will shift, programs will adjust, and families caught off guard will feel the squeeze first. Staying informed gives you control, and control protects your wallet. The hidden winners and losers. You're not being told about whenever a major national guideline changes. There are always winners and losers. And most Americans only hear about the health angle, not the economic one. But if this video is about your life and your wallet, we have to talk about who benefits from the 2026 food pyramid shift and who quietly pays the price. Big agriculture doesn't disappear when guidelines change. It adapts. Companies that already control large-scale production of plant proteins, alternative oils, and fortified foods are positioned to win. They can scale fast, they can meet new standards, and they can influence what shows up in schools, hospitals, and government programs. Smaller producers, family farms, regional food suppliers, they face pressure. Meeting new classifications, labeling expectations, and distribution demands cost money. When compliance costs rise, smaller players often get squeezed out, and less competition usually means higher prices for consumers. For you, that can mean fewer choices at the store, even if shelves look full. Same brands, different packaging, slightly higher prices, and a lot of marketing telling you it's better for you, whether your budget agrees or not. There's also a quiet shift happening in food marketing. Products that align with the new pyramid will receive favorable placement, endorsements, and institutional contracts. Others may slowly fade, not because they vanished, but because they're no longer prioritized. That matters because marketing influences habits, and habits influence spending. If healthier options are promoted but cost more, families feel pressure to do the right thing, financially and emotionally. That stress is real, especially when parents feel judged for feeding their kids what they can't afford. Understanding this power shift lets you step back and see the system clearly, not emotionally, strategically. You stop blaming yourself for rising costs and start recognizing broader forces at play. And once you see that, you can make choices that work for you, not just for the guideline. How this change could shape America's health for decades. Zoom out for a moment. This update isn't designed for next week or next year. It's aimed at the next 30 to 40 years of American life. That's why it feels slow, quiet, and technical. But its impact is massive. The goal is to reduce diet-related illness before it starts. Fewer hospital visits, fewer prescriptions, fewer chronic conditions that drain families emotionally and financially. If successful, this could mean lower healthcare costs long-term, and that affects everyone, whether you're insured or not. But here's the tension. Long-term benefits don't help families struggling right now. Telling a parent that healthier eating may reduce medical bills in 20 years doesn't solve the problem of affording groceries this month. That disconnect is where frustration grows and where trust erodes. If the transition isn't handled carefully, the gap between intention and reality widens. Families who can afford to adapt early may see benefits sooner. Families who can't may feel punished for circumstances outside their control. That's why education matters just as much as guidelines. When people understand affordable ways to meet new standards, outcomes improve. When they don't, resentment builds. The future health of America depends not just on what's recommended, but on whether everyday people can realistically follow it. And that brings us to the most important question of all. The question every American should be asking right now. The real question isn't whether the food pyramid changed. It's this. Will this change work for people like you? Will it help families living paycheck to paycheck? Will it support seniors on fixed incomes? Will it acknowledge the reality of food deserts, time poverty, and rising costs? Or will it quietly widen the gap between those who can afford ideal eating and those who are just trying to survive? That question doesn't have a simple answer yet. But what does make a difference is awareness. Americans who stay informed are harder to leave behind. Families who understand policy shifts adapt faster. And viewers who follow updates like this avoid being blindsided. That's why this conversation matters. Not for clicks, not for panic, but for preparation. Because the food on your table affects your energy, your health, your children's development, and your long-term financial stability. And changes like this don't reverse once they're in motion. This is one of those moments where paying attention early gives you an advantage later. And as more updates roll out, pricing changes, program adjustments, school policy shifts, staying connected becomes more important than ever if you want to protect your family, your health, and your future. This is the kind of information you can't afford to ignore, and this is only the beginning.